Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world. Our guest today is Lusely Martinez, a senior talent acquisition partner at Syndio and founder of First Gen Lab. Sorry about that. So, Lusely, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to the show.
Yeah, in fact, it's fantastic to have you on the Default Global podcast. And before we dive into global hiring and workplace equity, could you maybe please share a bit about your career journey?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually jumped into HR quite a long time ago, back in 2015. Is when I first started working alongside specifically business owners and entrepreneurs to help them basically scale up their businesses. I did that as a Jane of all trades for quite some time. And that's where I met the CEO of CodeSignal, who eventually wanted to sign me on full time. I had partnered with him to be his executive assistant. And while, I helped him a lot with, research and all that kind of jazz, we were doing a lot of hiring and a lot of growth. And that is where I got a lot of my major foundation for data-based decision-making and skill-based hiring, and really just kind of making sure that there is some structure in what we're doing so that we can learn from the process each time. So after CodeSignal, at CodeSignal, I built up the entire recruiting team. I don't want to cut myself short there. I built up the entire recruiting team and eventually was promoted to a spot on there, managing their candidate experience. And eventually we were affected, by the tech layoffs. And I found a new position at Compliant where I was the sole recruiter there. I was one half of the entire people team. So I managed a whole lot of the talent side of things. So everything from training hiring managers on how to be unbiased and basically just learn how to interview, to also how to assess candidates properly, as well as even building out onboarding programs, all kinds of things. But I implemented a greenhouse multiple times throughout my career, so I did that there. Had a lot of fun. That company, unfortunately, did not make it to Series A and went under. And so now I find myself at Syndio. Syndio is a workplace equity platform that's currently aiming to basically just remove any disparities that may be in regards to race, gender, ethnicity, and pay within organizations, and really kind of resolve those upfront. And so I joined on a short contract basis, helping my friend Whitney out in recruiting quite a few different roles there. I'm partnering with her, so I get to manage the entire full desk of my roles, which is fantastic, just the way I like it pretty much. But basically, I get to really work directly with those hiring managers to figure out what their pain points are and keep evaluating the process and iterating, making changes to ensure that they're finding the talent they really, really need.
Sounds good. So you have successfully built and scaled recruiting functions for like you mentioned, for a number of companies, including called Signal and Syndio. So how has your approach evolved over the years, especially when we're talking about like different kinds of people in various verticals and domains? Can you talk more about that?
So
maybe any key lessons or shifts in strategy that you have found particularly impactful.
one of the most important things in recruiting I've noticed is to really kind of use user-centered design when it comes to recruiting. So that means focus on the first user, which is the hiring manager. That is one of your, clients pretty much. So really kind of understand their pain points, ask all the questions, really figure out what happened, why was there turnover, so that you can figure out how to avoid that the next time around. Because it's not just a list of what is this person going to do, but it's also what do they need to show you during the interview that will tell you that they'll be able to do those things. And for different roles, it's different things. So for coding, and it depends obviously for different levels, but if you're hiring for entry level coding, it's fantastic to use assessments up front because it actually like eliminates a whole lot of the legwork when it comes to high volume recruiting. I find that that way you can really suss out the people that have the skills required for your role. That's the first side of it. But then you can't necessarily include that kind of evaluation up front for every role. Like when it's a senior level role or even above mid-level, you really want to be able to finesse that process a little bit more, make sure that you talk to the people and really get to know them and ensure that it's going to be a good fit before having them sign on to maybe say a technical interview or even a take-home exercise. Now, that's the one thing that I really do like to do across all of my roles. There's some roles where it's just simply not necessary because it's entry level. All we really need is a display in other areas. But I think that just having some kind of evaluation of skills is helpful so the team knows where they need to go from. But some teams just don't want to do that. And that's fair. That's totally fair. If the team doesn't want to do that, then we have to make sure that we're assessing throughout the interview process using a structured interview method, which means listing out those questions in advance, following those questions regularly, being consistent with them in every single interview, and then editing them based on the changes that are needed after every round. So basically an iterative process, always ready to change, learn, and develop. I think that's the main thing that I've learned throughout my career is that it's important to evolve the process, be flexible with the process, but also coach your team on the reasons why certain things are necessary because you're trying to avoid them making some mistakes. So sometimes you do need to push back.
Yeah. And given your passion for fostering cross-cultural communication, how do you believe it helps in terms of like operational growth within like a multinational and maybe global organizations? Can you share maybe an example from your experience where effective cross-cultural communication made, really cool impact?
Well, at CodeSignal, we did global hiring, and currently at Syndio, we're also doing global hiring. But at CodeSignal, and also at Syndio, actually, they're a remote first. So what that means is that they are hiring around certain hub cities just to be able to grow in a responsible way and be able to even provide more opportunities for cross-effective, team gatherings and stuff like that. So with those organizations, one of the most important things that I feel has been important when it comes to cross-cultural communication is just getting clarification. Like, can you repeat that again or say it a different way? I want to make sure that I understand what you're actually saying. And sometimes even rephrasing my question a million times just until I like really get what I'm trying to understand, really get to the nitty-gritty of the situation. I think that's what's really, really important is that kind of level of curiosity when it comes to other cultures and that openness to kind of say, I don't know, please tell me a little bit more. So at CodeSignal, we hired in Armenia, as well as in the United States, in Russia, Germany, Switzerland. It was all over the world. And so as the main person that was actually in charge of a lot of the candidate communication, one of the main concerns is using straightforward language when it comes to cross-cultural communication, really using straightforward language. Be concise, make it short, make it sweet, and be clear. And that fosters interest, I would say, across many different countries and many different verticals. If you're able to cater to a lot of different audiences in your messaging, then that's kind of like the goal. I personally am, a first gen person. I first came to the United States, when I was 4 years old. I am technically a citizen, but I did not come here until I was, after I'd already learned Spanish as my first language. And so sometimes there are sayings, even in English, that I just simply don't get. So I've always had to ask about what it means. And that's also taught me a lot about the kind of people that, I'm dealing with and communicating with, because I've noticed that when it comes to especially cross-cultural communication, curiosity is okay. It's one of those main things that's expected. It's one of those things that should be welcomed, and questions are important in understanding and developing relationships. It's also what puts you on the map as an organization as well, is those little small interactions, because they build it's a domino effect.
Hmm. And speaking about this first gen talent, right? So I also know that you're a founder at First Gen Lab, right? This
Mm-hmm.
unique venture focusing on as far as empowering first gen talent. So can you tell us more about this initiative? What exactly are you doing with this in this organization?
So with First Gen Lab, we're beyond an advisory lab. The idea is that we're basically an ally in all the unique challenges of navigating the corporate and startup world for the first time. I've done it now multiple times. As somebody that grew up in the advent of the digital age, I've helped a lot of organizations digitize themselves and modernize and bring in technology to really supercharge their work. And that has given me unique insights into all the challenges that especially first generation founders deal with. So that's what I'm trying to, I guess, do with First Gen Lab is be able to not only provide, professional development and growth to any first generation individual, but also to businesses that have no idea what they're doing and kind of just give them a little bit of information. And a lot of it is like, it's free up front. The idea is these are just guidelines. These are best practices that have very much worked for me over and over and over again. It's data based. And here it is. My goal overall is to just basically be able to offer my services, my expertise, because I've realized that there is a unique knowledge that I do bring, having done this quite a few times now.
That sounds really interesting. But let's go back to Syndio, right? Syndio's pay equity software, as far as understood, helps companies quickly analyze and resolve pay gaps. That's from my understanding, right? So could you maybe walk us through how this software really works and how it assists companies in making ongoing compensation decisions?
Well, Syndio basically, it's got 3 products on the platform, and there's more features that are being developed every single day. But under the platform of Syndio, there's PayEQ, OpEQ, and PayFinder. PayEQ is that original analytics workspace where companies that have more than 1,000 employees, because we need a significant amount of data, give us that information, and we can then help them with our software flag those disparities that they can then look into and amend. Then there's also OpEQ. That helps you diagnose exactly where those potential inequities might be coming from in relation to, say, maybe your policies or the opportunities available within the organization. And then the last one is Payfinder. That one's given to, say, recruiters or hiring managers, anyone that is enabled to make offers so that they're preventing inequities happening up front, because it's usually in that negotiation phase where those inequities happen, because not everyone is actually coached in negotiating. It's one of the other things that I'm trying to help people within First Gen Lab is like really give them the tools to stand up for themselves and handle themselves in these different environments, because many people of a lot of different backgrounds are disadvantaged in not having that training growing up or having that environment around them. People like myself may have been going through, like I actually became a professional around the same time that my mother did. So we were navigating it together almost as peers, despite the age difference.
Syndio is getting kind of attention worldwide with jobs in Netherlands, right, and in the UK, or obviously in the US. So I'm curious to know how you choose the best places around the world for different jobs. How does your company determine like which roles are filled in specific countries? Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, the people team is very, very strategic, and they try to be extremely careful, especially now with their growth. So while Syndio did have some funding, now they're trying to really just open new positions based on revenue goals. So in line with that, we've shifted from being fully remote to being remote first, which means we're building around talent hub cities, specifically where we already have talent. So that's one part of the talent strategy, to be able to, make things more cost effective. The second thing is also based on where we have more client need, right? So if we already have a bunch of teammates on the West Coast, then it probably makes sense to fill roles in New York or even, Europe. So as I mentioned, we already have folks in the Netherlands and the UK, which is why specifically we are now growing in those two locations, as well as some of the major cities here in the United States, which are San Francisco, New York, and what's the last one? San Francisco, New York, and Seattle.
And I just need to ask this: what is your approach to compensation for global distributed teams? Do you use your own software? To clarify this part.
At Syndio, they cannot use their own software because there's just not enough.
Yeah,
there's not enough
talent,
employees to do that. However, there is kind of like their own version of this on a small scale that's done, via Excel sheets and mathematical equations, as well as, actual market research on other organizations that are our size, and also in our funding stage. So that's basically how compensation is typically done, through like real careful compensation analysis, and also taking a look at the people that are currently on the team and making sure that we're not creating any inequities by evaluating that as well. And as I said, we can't really use our software, but we're using it on a small scale with Excel spreadsheets. And not only that, our salaries are basically whatever the rate is going to be in the US is also the same rate across the world. It's just, translated to that currency.
Okay, awesome. Regarding like a talent acquisition tactics, how do you acquire talent in various countries? Do you collaborate with local recruitment agencies, or you utilize like a local job boards, or you have some other like approach to this?
I have largely used LinkedIn and also then smaller job boards. So more niche job boards. So doing the research with like the actual people. So when I had to recruit in Armenia, speaking to the Armenian folks and asking them, hey, where are the best job boards that everyone's getting the jobs at? Okay, let's buy a couple ads for the roles that we're trying to hire there. Same thing for like Russia and whatnot. And I would ask my teammates that are actually in those countries, because there's a paywall here, to make those to put those up for me. And we'd be able to track those back to my recruiting dashboard, and I'd be able to track those candidates and be able to chat with them. Currently at Syndio, I use LinkedIn a lot. I source via LinkedIn. A lot of folks in the UK and even in the Netherlands do use LinkedIn with their skills and whatnot. So that's one of the best ways, I think, in my opinion, is to be able to also do a Boolean search and find the individuals that you're looking for and target them based on the skill level that you're looking for, or even sometimes it's different titles, but there's a couple of different routes.
Yeah. And speaking about LinkedIn, in one of your LinkedIn posts, you mentioned that you received like a tons of direct messages regarding like open roles at Syndio. So what challenges maybe and opportunities do you face in remote hiring, and how do you handle lots of maybe applications while making sure that the hiring process is fair and open to everyone?
Yeah. So in order to make sure that the hiring process is fair and open to everyone, one of the main things that I do is I have to figure out what are some main disqualifiers up front. Like, what are some main things that really we cannot consider at this time? For a lot of organizations right now, we're realizing that it is quite expensive to provide visa support, and many startups are not able to do that anymore, or maybe they have to have a lot more income or even a legal team behind them to be able to do such a thing. So that's one of the main things that I'm able to ask just like upfront on the application, is ask, are you going to need this either now or in the future? That is a major thing that many people don't realize. But organizations cannot just all of a sudden change their policies to be able to accommodate something they simply do not have the resources to accommodate. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, we're currently hiring only in our hub cities at Syndio, right? So we eliminate folks that are not currently in the locations where we are hiring, which also helps reduce that volume. The second thing is I create templates for myself. So I have LinkedIn templates and responses for just about every single kind of situation, so that I can basically copy and paste and try to get back to every single person, because I understand what it's like to be on that other side of the silence from a recruiter when you're trying to reach out on LinkedIn. And I don't want people to lose hope, because there is hope. And there's always hope to be had. It's just a matter of don't give up, just keep trying, refine your strategy. And many people are giving up without doing any of those things. So that's kind of where I think about people first, of course.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, in also, making decisions that are fair. We think about those disqualifier things like upfront. So if they're not in the location, they require visa support. Maybe they don't have the skills that are required. So when it comes to engineering, um, sometimes we want them to have at least experience with one language, right? So I can ask that up front. And if they say they don't have that experience, unfortunately, on top of that, there's also the fact that we hiring remote first is also hugely difficult because a lot of people want to break into the industry without ever having done remote first work. And so testing for that is nuanced. It's more difficult. And many folks are still learning how to test for grit, self discipline, and those important factors when hiring people on a remote basis to ensure that they're going to know that these people are self driven and independent to get the work done. So then that's something that you start evaluating, though, through the selection process and making sure that they have all these different individual attributes and competencies to actually be successful in your work environment.
Yeah, and do you use any kind of tools to help with this? How do you feel about using systems for to score applicants, to score applications?
I personally don't score applications, but what I will do is I set up automations based on disqualifying factors. So if there is something that is a disqualification, I will automatically set up something to ensure that I'm not wasting my time with this resume. Why? Because I need to ensure that my time is used wisely. I only have 40 hours a week. That is what my contract is at Syndio. That means I'm not putting anything above that 40 because I'm not paid for it. Right? So that means I have to be extremely careful with
Yeah,
even how I spend my time. So
yeah.
yes, I use the ATS very wisely.
Hmm.
I use Greenhouse in particular. I use
Hmm.
knockout questions. I love to have, even during my phone calls, like before I even have people on the phone with me, I want to make sure that they really are qualified. So even after those applications come in, I still review every single one that is
Hmm.
qualified to ensure that they do have that kind of background that we're looking for that will translate well into this environment. Like, do they have the relevant skills that will at least translate?
Yeah.
Before I spend time on this. So it's basically just kind of using, uh, getting all that information up front so that you know what you're looking for. Calibrating very carefully with your hiring manager. Using a robust ATS that's going to be able to do a lot of automations for you to move faster. So, for example, I also have automations for like scheduling. So once I say, yeah, this candidate is great, I just advance them and there's an automation that I've set up to send them automatically my Calendly link.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot of back end work that goes into all of that. We all know it
100%.
takes some time to set up your Calendly and all the emails and all the follow ups. But once it's all set up, all of this becomes a lot easier. All that candidate experience that becomes a lot easier. And a lot of people don't view recruiting the way you would view sales, but it's extremely important to view it that way because somebody that's a candidate could become a future employee at any
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
and also a future client at any
Hmm.
time. So it's extremely careful to always keep things positive as much as possible all the way through the process.
100%. And for those global tech talent who are listening to us right now, what advice would you give them in navigating these opportunities with global companies like Syndio?
One of the main things is to really do your research. If the company is unable to provide you the support that you need, don't waste your time applying or spending any energy there. It's not worth it. That's the main thing that I'm going to tell people. Spend time researching and going deeper into organizations that actually will be able to support you and your growth goals. So, for example, if you are early on in your career, as much as you don't want to, a corporate role is likely your smartest bet because they have more resources to be able to support your growth and give you mentorship. Whereas if you are more advanced in your career, what you need to be able to do, you need to be able to um, be flexible, right? You need to be able to recognize that you don't know everything. You are not an expert in your field. There is still way more to be learned and be humble about that, and be able to go to that startup environment with that kind of thinking. Because what worked before is not going to work in a startup environment. But if you have valuable past experience that can translate, that's useful. So it's finding organizations that really align with what your needs are, and applying there. I would say that overwhelming recruiters with messages might not be the most successful tactic. Because if you're anything like me and you've been bombarded with thousands of messages, there were times that I wanted to give up. I swear. There were times that I did not want to respond to every single message,
Yeah.
but I was like, no, this was the promise you made, stick to it.
Yeah.
That's how hard it can be. So I would say candidates need to really kind of think about that before they just start reaching out to people. Really do the work. Target organizations that really do have what you need. And if not, do not waste your time. Move on to the next one. There are other opportunities out there, but if you're wasting your energy on the wrong ones, you're not going to then spend energy preparing for the true opportunities that are laying ahead.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I appreciate sharing my knowledge. If anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, please feel free. Reach out. Would love to hear that you listen to me on Default Global.
Take care.